speakers stand up?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
So my name is Bredan Montague. I am the editor of The Ecologist. The Ecologist was founded in 1971, and at that point was a leading exponent of systems thinking. So I'm reading Marx through the lens of systems theory for some reason. The question I want to answer today is, what can Karl Marx tell us about climate change? Karl Marx died in 1883, and it was 13 years later that the Swedish scientist Svante Arrhenius first published a calculation looking at how the release of carbon dioxide could drive global warming. So Marx wasn't really there at that moment, and as far as I know, he didn't use the phrase climate change and he didn't use the phrase global warming. So how could it be possible that Marx could tell us something specific and anything useful about climate change? The argument I want to make, in fact, is that it's an absolute tragedy because if more of us humans had read Marx, had fully understood Marx, and acted on that understanding, we would have predicted climate change and we would have prevented it. More broadly, if we had understood Marx, we would have predicted and prevented biodiversity collapse, the wholesale destruction of our rainforests and the pollution of our oceans. We would have prevented the animal casualties from plastics in the oceans, and also the human casualties from things like air pollution in our cities. So the first argument is that this is true in a very general sense, that Marx advocated for societies where production was in the interests of human needs rather than in the interests of profit making. So profit making for the sale of commodities. Marx was also specifically interested in the welfare and the needs of humans looking forward for generations. So in that sense, you can see generally a Marxist sort of understanding would have assisted in a more ecological society building. But Marx wasn't alone in these ideas. He wasn't the first to say that society shouldn't be based on money making, and he certainly hasn't been the last. So why do we still refer to Marx today, and why do we still use the term Marxism? I think this is an important question because for tens of thousands of people currently today, the word Marxism is actually associated with totalitarianism and indeed with really severe environmental destruction. So using the term Marxist actually does present a bit of a barrier to reaching out to people who we fundamentally want to have a discussion with. So the question is, should we just forget about Marx as an individual while fighting for a society based on need and not on profit? And my answer to this again is no, we can't do that. Marx's personal contribution to philosophy, natural philosophy, the sciences, to political economy and to social sciences was specific and really quite extraordinary. Specifically, Marx developed an analysis of our ecological and social systems that would have allowed us to predict and prevent climate change. These contributions have not always been totally unique, but they were, in his own time, extremely leading edge, and more importantly, his analysis has always been based on finding solutions to the ecological crisis, which are global in scale and historic in ambition. He presented his analysis in terms of the need for revolutionary change, and as we see today, it's only change on that scale that is really credible. Changing light bulbs or not using certain plastics, it's just not a credible answer. So what evidence do we have that Marx would have predicted climate change and that his solutions would have prevented it? Marx understood nature and human societies as systems. He talked about an organic unity. He recognised that some of these systems were linear and some of these systems were non-linear. And that he recognised that systems that were completely linear would have to fail over time. So this is why I'm interested in sort of systems thinking and Marxism. To give an example, if a tree grows by 1 centimetre every year, in 1.2 billion years, the height of that tree would be the same as the diameter of the planet Earth. So a linear system will always fail. It will always outgrow its environment. Conversely, just for pedants, if a tree shrinks by a centimetre a year, over time it will just become completely irrelevant to human existence. It may still exist, but we wouldn't be able to detect it. So, in a very broad sense, linear systems will always fail, will always disappear. So what you need is non-linear systems. Human life has been on the planet for 3.5 billion years. So over that time, the linear systems within the natural environment have tended to collapse or fail. And so we are, as human beings, surrounded by non-linear systems. The human body itself is has within it non-linear systems. So an example of this is how we keep our temperature constant. So we have feedback mechanisms in our own body that make sure that our body doesn't get too hot or too cold, which leads to death. And Marx had an understanding of this. He didn't use exactly this language, but he did develop this out of his sort of dialectical theory. The climate is a homeostatic system. So in periods of natural history, more carbon dioxide has gone into the atmosphere. But what that happens is that causes more vegetation to grow, and then that vegetation sucks the carbon back out of the atmosphere. So the reason that we've had a temperate climate that has allowed humans to exist and evolve, and has allowed us to build all our civilization, is precisely because we live in this massive homeostatic, non-linear system. If the climate had been linear, it would have either got too hot like Venus and we would have burnt to death, or it got too cold and we would have frozen. So, to bring this down to earth shudderingly, I want to talk about shit. Or to be more precise, Marx talked about shit. So Marx was living in 1850 in London, and they had this problem, which was they created a linear system, which was you grow stuff in the countryside, you ship it to London, you eat it, and then you dump your excrement on the street. So all the nutrients are coming in from the country into London. Now, they needed an engineering solution to this, and what they did is they built our sewers. So they pump it all out into the sea. So again, you have we get these terms mixed up all the time. You have a linear system. The nutrients come into the city and then they're dumped out of the sea. The problem, so they solved the problem of the shit in London, but they created a further problem, and this is classic sort of Marxist. To resolve one crisis, they create the next crisis. So what we have is then immediately afterwards, we run out of nutrients in the countryside, because if we had a circular or a non-linear system, the shit should have been shipped back and put back on the farmland, so there was a circular system. Rather than doing this, the powers that be, the ruling class, just went to Peru and stole loads of bird shit and shipped it all the way into the UK and spread that all over our farmland. So you see that having a linear system actually leads to colonialism. And they shipped Chinese workers into Peru and whipped them to death, and the average life expectancy was 3 years. And that was just to put shit on boats and sell it into the UK to solve this problem. They ran out of shit in Peru. So then we invented fossil fuel-based fertilizer, which is what we're using currently. Now what we find is we still have this linear system. It's still stupid. So what's happening is we're putting nitrogen back into the soil, but not all the other nutrients that we take out when we farm. We're still pushing that into the sea. So there have been, at least one UN expert has argued that we have 60 cycles left, we have 60 crop cycles left. And at that point, basically we've destroyed the soil, we can't farm anymore. So Marx actually described this precise process as a breach or an ecological rift in the metabolic relationship between nature and society. So he's on top of this analysis. And this rift does continue today. So what we're seeing with climate change is exactly the same problem as we did with fertilizer. What we're doing is we're sucking oil and carbon out of the ground, we're burning it, and we're dumping it into the atmosphere. Now, carbon dioxide doesn't smell like shit, so they don't have to build a sewage system. And had it been an inert gas and not caused any further problems, then this linear system might not have caused us any problems. Obviously, carbon traps heat, so we're heating the atmosphere, but it's essentially the same problem. And this also links into Marx's analysis of capitalism, because what you have in capitalism, and it's inherent to capitalism, is you have a circular system of money going round and round, but you have a linear system of commodities. So commodities are always stuff that's sucked out of the ground, used, and then dumped into the ground. and it doesn't biodegrade, it doesn't go back into the system. So it's inevitable in capitalism over time that we will run out of raw materials and we'll run out of landfill and we will create pollutants in the process. So had Marx been alive in 1896 and read about the dumping of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, he would have immediately understood the implications, and he would have been one of the first people to do so. He would have understood that climate change will lead to extinction. But he also would have understood that capitalism will inherently lead to extinction. So we need to urgently develop systems, human economic systems, human social systems, which are non-linear, which are circular, so that everything we produce, all our waste becomes the raw material of the next phase in the cycle. So Marx, writing back then, understood the task of a future communist society. It's not good enough that we have equality. We also have to start building economies that sit perfectly within natural cycles, or at least don't destroy them. So we need system change, and we need that to prevent climate change. But we also need to actually end the destruction of nature more generally. So what Marx also tells us is, I mean, for me personally, I don't want to prevent climate change and then starve in 60 years' time. So we have to explain to Extinction Rebellion activists who are only interested perhaps in climate change that capitalism will create the next crisis. This is the first, but there will always be more. And actually, if we want a society which isn't constantly caught in anxiety about extinction, we need a society that fits within our natural environment. And Marx got that so long ago, it's quite incredible. Thank you.